everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined, as always, by the one, the only, Weston Hodkiewicz. We're coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field to talk about the Packers 2024 schedule. Wes, the schedule is out. It has 17 regular season games on it.
I was hoping for 16.
nine at home, 8 on the road. We knew all that beforehand. We knew who the opponents would be. Now we know the order. We know the game times. Just your initial impression when you took a glance at the schedule. What jumped out at you first?
Nothing, which is interesting because there were so many years where there'd be like an early bye week or some bizarre stretch of road games or, some things that just catch your eye. This was the most, as I wrote in our Insider Inbox column, the most straightforward schedule I think the Packers have had in all my years covering the team. To answer your question, truthfully, it is that primetime slate of games, 4 straight weeks of primetime games late in the season, including that Thursday night Thanksgiving game against the Miami Dolphins. But by and large, Mike, it was a very balanced schedule. The Packers got the bye week smack dab in the middle of the season. There's no week 4. For once. There's no week 4. There's no week 14, week 13, week 5. No, it's right there in week 10. Some pivotal games sandwiched around that, being able to host the Detroit Lions. You want to win that one going into the bye week. You and I will be talking about that leading into that game.
For sure.
And then on the other side of it, facing Caleb Williams for the first time, I believe, on that one. Yeah, because they'll get him in the finale at Lambeau. So, pretty straightforward schedule, and honestly, I think for the Green Bay Packers, especially with that start in Brazil, as normal as you could hope for.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, the bye week is in a normal spot for the first time in a long time. It's after 9 games and then 8 games beyond that, so that's as close to the middle as you're going to get with an odd number of regular season games. Couple other things that jumped out at me, and we'll talk a little bit more about the stretch of primetime games late in the year, which really is an anomaly. It's the one true quirky thing about this schedule, quite frankly. But the other thing too is, other than during that stretch of primetime games, late November and early December, the Packers don't have back-to-back road games. Nope. Except for when they have the Thursday night game at Detroit in early December, and then 10 days later they have another night game at Seattle. Otherwise, every time the Packers go on a road, they come back, you're not preparing to go right back on the road again for another game. I think that's something that could really benefit this team because, as you said, every year there seems to be a stretch where it's 4 road games in 5 weeks or something like that. Obviously this year, with the Packers having the extra home game, 9 home games versus 8 road games, and then one of the road games was already known as the trip to Brazil early in the season, and you kind of figured that the NFL would put a home game in week 2 after the Packers are coming back from that long flight, and that's exactly what happened. I think in that respect, the schedule sets up nicely because you don't look at it from a travel standpoint as saying that's going to be that's going to be really tough on everybody. That's sort of what jumped out at me.
It is the craziest thing, Mike, because the most difficult challenge, I'm talking just from a pure body composition standpoint, is going to Brazil and then coming back 9 days later than you got the Indianapolis Colts. Making that type of time difference, trying to use the long weekend to sort of reacclimate yourself to Central Time Zone and all that type of stuff and getting your sleep cycle back. But overall, I mean, even when you look at the back-to-back games that they have, Sunday, November 24th against San Francisco at home, then they come back and on Thursday they play the Thanksgiving game against Miami. Well, that starts 2 weeks after their bye. So it's not even like you had gone through this long, arduous sort of stretch and then you get the 2 games in 4 days. Even then, you're relatively rested, you would hope, because it's just the game going down to Chicago, that 40-minute flight down to Chicago that runs before that. The part that I love, and again, you never know how these things are going to go, flex scheduling and everything that goes into that, but the season starts with 4 straight home games at noon Central start times. Indianapolis Colts, which, by the way, I love that matchup. Because it gives the Packers, Anthony Richardson coming back, hopefully healthy once again, and Jordan Love, 2 of the more recognizable young quarterbacks in this league, could be very exciting from that standpoint. Then you get the Minnesota You get the Minnesota Vikings, Aaron Jones coming back, and then you get the back-to-back games with Arizona and then the Houston Texans, which is a game that you pointed out, seeing the reigning NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year in C.J. Stroud. It's an exciting stretch to begin the season, and then on the back half of it, you have some big games with some huge implications, but in some ways it also lines up okay with the way the home slate sort of works itself out.
Yeah, I think another thing that I like, because this doesn't always happen, is that the one time the Packers are on the short week with regard to the Thursday game, yep. Not only is the Thursday game at home, which is the Thanksgiving night against the Miami Dolphins, the Packers have another Thursday game the following week at Detroit, but obviously you're not on a short week there, right, because you're going Thursday to Thursday. But when you're on the short week, you have that game at home, so there isn't the travel involved. And the Sunday before, you're at home. So you're not coming back from a road game and then suddenly you're cramming in that short week where then you're playing on a Thursday. Now obviously that's a difficult that's a difficult two-step, so to speak. 2 games in 5 days, both at Lambeau, is nice. But San Francisco 49ers, the Sunday before Thanksgiving, which obviously is a rematch of the NFC Divisional playoff from last year, and then the Miami Dolphins on Thanksgiving night. That's back-to-back playoff teams, yep, from 2023 that you're playing in a span of 5 days.
I do need someone from the league to actually explain to me why the Packers keep getting matched against Miami for holiday games.
Yeah, that is
2
really
years ago, we played a Christmas
that is strange.
Game there.
2022 it was Christmas in Miami, and now this year it's Thanksgiving at Lambeau.
As uncommon opponents go, that's pretty strange. I mean, I don't know about you. I don't think about the Green Bay Packers playing on Christmas in Miami, nor do I think of the Miami Dolphins being a Thanksgiving team. But be that as it is, this is the schedule that you have. And the very unique swing of Miami Dolphins football, and then basically a regular 7-day recovery stretch before you travel to Detroit and make that leap across Lake Michigan. Overall, again, even the back-to-back games, having the 10 days between the two of them before you go to Seattle, which is a big stretch. I mean, that's a big trip, but
yeah,
it's pretty laid out pretty good, Mike. It's pretty wild that way.
The other thing that's interesting, and this is what I wrote about on our website with regard to the 4 consecutive night games. And again, just for the rundown, it starts Thanksgiving night with Miami at Lambeau, the following Thursday night at Detroit. Then after the little mini bye on the weekend, the following Sunday night, you're at Seattle. And then you come back with the 4th consecutive primetime game, Monday Night Football, which is the Packers' only appearance this season on Monday Night Football against New Orleans. Here's the thing, though. If that Week 18 game, which the way the NFL does things now, nothing is set in stone with regard to Week 18. Could be Saturday, could be Sunday. You don't know what time you're going to kick off. A lot of that stuff gets determined kind of at the last minute based on the playoff picture, obviously. But that Week 18 home game against the Bears, if the league decides to put that one in prime time, which you can't rule out, then 5 of the last 6 regular season games will be night games for Green Bay after having a stretch in the early part of the season where after the Packers come back from Brazil, they have 6 out of 7 noon Central Time kickoffs, which is the type of stretch that we haven't really seen in a long time around here either. To have a stretch of 7 games and only one of them is not a noon Central Time kick. From a work standpoint for us, we love that, right?
Yeah, from a marriage standpoint, it's kind of nice. I remember 2 years ago, I think it was, the Packers had 1 noon home game.
Yeah, that was it.
That was it.
Yeah.
So to have 4 right off the bat, that's pretty cool. I will say this, too. I threw this in my news and notes. There's always something quirky about these schedules. I remember a couple of years ago, it was actually when I was still at the Press-Gazette, I wrote about how the Packers, because the Vikings wanted to open U.S. Bank Stadium against Green Bay ended up having back-to-back road games to start the season. That was the first time they'd done that in 93 years or something.
Yeah.
This particular schedule, very interesting note. For as often as the Green Bay Packers and Chicago Bears have played each other, this is the first time since 1932 and 33 that they've had back-to-back regular season finales against each other. And if you want to take it even further, it's the first time Green Bay has ever hosted the Chicago Bears in back-to-back regular season finales. Just wild when you think about how many different schedules, how many different combinations, how many machinations of this NFL, seasons have been created, that we're going to kind of see an opening first chapter here in a book that is pretty darn long.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because in in sort of the recent Packers history, Packers-Bears finales in the regular season have ended up having a lot of significance. You look at obviously 2010 got the Packers in the playoffs, started them on the run. 2013 at Soldier Field was the division title on the line with Rodgers and Cobb both coming back from long injuries.
Yep.
And we all know the 4th and 8 from the 48. And then last year, the Packers had to win that game to get into the playoffs and launched what almost became a very extended playoff run. And might have been if not for letting that game in San Francisco just get away in the final 5 minutes.
You and I last week we were talking about the Detroit game. I had to laugh because I was rewatching parts of that episode, or in our last one earlier this week, I should say. You were talking about, hey, maybe Detroit in the finale. I was like, hey, maybe week 2 versus Detroit. And they are going to play a primetime game, a Thursday night football game there on December 5th. But it was funny to me that the two soothsayers over here we're all swinging at pitches we can't see, but it's still pretty funny that, well, maybe it'll be the finale. Well, maybe it'll be the beginning. Maybe it'll be both. It's actually neither.
Yeah.
So congratulations, Wes.
I'll take care of a little bit of sponsor business here, Wes. Sirius XM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. And at Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50-plus years of better. All right, we know about, the Brazil game, and we know the significance of the division games and all that. Is there a game on this schedule that, isn't really being talked about all that much or whatever, but that you think when the time comes, it's going to have maybe a bigger spotlight on it than we might predict at the moment?
It's a really good question, Mike, because the one that when we did our instant reacts, pick a game out that really jumps off the page to you, I said Detroit, but it was for the exact opposite reason of what you're describing, because it was a team that's the defending NFC North champion that went to the NFC Championship game, came within a nail of getting to the Super Bowl, and you're going to host them the week before the bye week. So in terms of consequential games, I feel like that is the close of the first half of the season. That's right before halftime, trying to run the 2-minute drill here, right?
Yeah.
But the game, if you structure it under that construct, it probably is week 5 at the Los Angeles Rams, because that's where Green Bay, you would hope, can build up, like Mike McCarthy always used to talk about, that quarter pole, that first quarter of the season, build up some momentum and take on a team that I thought, Green Bay made the big run, and everybody was so excited about it. I thought that Green Bay's run during the final 6-7 weeks of the season, it sort of overshadowed everything the Rams were doing once Matthew Stafford got healthy.
Right, yeah.
The Rams had quite the rally there, too, at the end of the season. And again, if there wasn't for the 7th game, they would have been able to close out that last playoff spot. So for Green Bay to go off of that start, get some early momentum, hopefully, and then travel and play that first game out in Los Angeles against the Rams, I'm very interested. I should say at SoFi. Obviously, they played at the Coliseum in 2018, but that's going to be kind of a little bit of a measuring stick moment, because then you come back and you have Arizona, and then we'll see where things go for the Cardinals. But then you have Houston, then you have Detroit. Then things really start to ramp up.
Yeah, and as I mentioned in the video that we shot with Larry, I kind of had my eye on this. Regardless of where it was going to fall in the schedule, but this home matchup with Houston, which ends up in week 7. It's a noon start at Lambeau Field Sunday, October 20th. You have the Packers and the Texans, two teams that a year ago at this time, nobody would have said they're going to the playoffs in 2023. They were the two teams, really the one team from each conference that were the surprise playoff qualifiers. And then, as you mentioned before, it's C.J. Stroud, the reigning NFL Offensive Rookie of the Year, Jordan Love at quarterback. These two guys, young up-and-coming quarterbacks who could be big-time stars in this league for a long time to come. And this will be their first matchup, and it's a matchup because of Houston being in the AFC. It's not one that you're going to see all that often, potentially more than once every 4 years because of that 17th game thing now. But still, AFC versus NFC, these two young quarterbacks, they're not going to square off a whole heck of a lot, and this is the first one here in October.
Yeah, you won't hear me complaining either. I really want to go to Energy. I have not been to Energy yet. I missed it.
That's right. You had mentioned that's one. It's
like one of three I haven't been to.
I distinctly remember the time I was there, that 2012 Sunday Night Football game where the Texans were either 4-0 or 5-0 or whatever it was.
They were 5-0.
Yeah, 5-0, and the Packers were kind of struggling because they had lost the Hail Mary game in Seattle. They had lost on another kind of a tough, controversial decision in Indianapolis because of a roughing the passer thing where it looked like the Packers were going to get a strip sack, and that got taken away. And then they go down to Houston, and Aaron Rodgers throws for a gazillion touchdowns, and they completely blow out the last undefeated team in the NFL.
Still,
that season,
to me, one of the most bizarre seasons that. Not the Packers. I'll flip this both ways. Let's start where I was going to say about the Texans. That was the Texans' only loss in their first 12 games. So not only was they the last undefeated team to lose, they went on a 6-game winning streak after that.
I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, and then they kind of tanked at the end of the season.
That's probably why I don't really remember it, because they did end up fading badly at the end of that season.
And then they ended up getting beat by the Patriots in the playoffs. Green Bay, I've always maintained this is not where I want this conversation to go, but we're going there. So I'm just going to drive and sit in the seat and drive. I've always said the 2012 season is one of the best Packers seasons that no one ever talks about.
Yep.
Because that was actually a pretty good team. The defense was ranked 11th that year. Casey Hayward was a Rookie of the Year finalist on the defensive side of the ball.
Yep.
But then the Kaepernick game happened, and you had the Hail Mary early in the season. There's so many things that people remember about that year for the wrong reasons. But all that being said, the exciting thing, to bring it back to this thing about Stroud, is you covered the early days of Aaron Rodgers. I did not. I was covering Green Bay Preble track and field and Luxembourg Casco wrestling and all those.
I did that
things
for a long time myself as well. During the Brett Favre era, that's what I was doing.
But
much of the Brett Favre era, I should say.
What you saw that I did not see unless I was watching it on Sundays was Aaron Rodgers taking on Drew Brees for the first time. Aaron Rodgers taking on Tom Brady for the first time, Peyton Manning. The list goes on and on.
Yeah.
And the exciting thing about Jordan at this part of it is you are going to see Anthony Richardson. You are going to see C.J. Stroud. You're going to see some of these young up-and-comers. We'll see what can happen here with Caleb Williams. Jared Goff's the second highest paid quarterback in the NFL. So now that Jordan has established himself, and you still have to stay on that track and keep climbing, but now you aren't so much thinking about, okay, well, how is Jordan going to play against this particular defense? You start to get sort of the celebrity, the awe factor going into these games. And that it was fun. This compared to last year where there were so many questions about the Packers and the players and the young, youth of this roster. Well, this year when I was looking at the schedule and how it laid out, I'm thinking a lot of times of Jordan Love versus this team. You look at, a guy like, Josh Jacobs. What's he going to do against this defense?
Yeah.
That's cool, and that's what happens when you're a contending team.
Yeah, I didn't realize this until we turned on the cameras and started diving into this a little bit more. But the whole AFC NFC thing this year, the NFC North is matched up with the AFC South. So everybody in the NFC North is going to play every team in the AFC South over the course of the season. The Packers have those 4 games against the AFC South teams within the first 8 weeks of the season.
Yep.
Like those 4 matchups. So then after that, the only AFC matchup you have left is the quote-unquote 17th game, which in this case becomes the Miami game on Thanksgiving night at Lambeau. So just kind of interesting in a sense how that fell. The 4 games against the AFC South, it's back-to-back weeks 2 and 3. Home against Indy, road at Tennessee, and then back-to-back weeks 7 and 8, home against Houston, on the road at Jacksonville. just, kind of fit those games into, nice, neat little packages early in the season instead of being in like weird spots or whatever. And again, as we started the whole conversation, the only thing about this schedule that feels quirky to me is the run of 4 consecutive primetime games starting on Thanksgiving night, which I can't ever remember 4 consecutive primetime games, and that could turn into 5 primetime games in a span of 6 if the Week 18 game against Chicago ends up at night as well.
Well, and the fact that you got to remember, it may be kind of a scheduling quirk that they end up being 4 straight primetime games, but it's not an oversight that it happened in the second half of the season, that happened down the stretch.
True.
That tells you that the
Very
NFL,
true.
Sees these teams, the teams that they're playing. I mean, there's no pushovers in that group either. I mean, I understand that Seattle didn't make the playoffs last year and New Orleans didn't, but they were both alive the last week of the season last year. So that part of it's really interesting to me. The other thing I always want to say, because so many people always bring this up in inbox that we talk about is, the strength of schedule. And I answered it this week. Like, why is the Packers schedule harder than the Lions? And again, that's all subjective.
Yeah, I got that question a couple weeks ago,
Yeah.
and tried to explain, based on the matchups and how it works, how the Packers' strength of schedule based on records, the 2023 records of their opponents, the Packers' schedule is the 5th hardest in the NFL for 2024 as of right now.
But the thing I always tell people is one season does not dictate the next. You can ask the 22 Packers that.
Yeah, no
with how
question.
that schedule ended up lining up. To me, the more important thing is how your season lays out rather than exactly who you're playing. And I even heard, I think Larry McCarron was mentioning earlier today, it's about when you play certain teams.
Yeah.
At what point
you hear that a lot around this league. The longer you're connected to this league, you hear it a lot. It's not who you play, it's when you play them. And that does end up playing a big factor. In that respect, I'm not exactly sad to see that Miami, a Florida team, might be coming here when it's a little chilly on Thanksgiving night, and New Orleans, a Southern Dome team, coming here 2 nights before Christmas when it could be even a little bit colder yet. Those are the little things that might work in Green Bay's favor here.
100%. And then the other aspect of it too is that, I think back to last year with Atlanta, I would make no predictions in terms of how certain games would have played out, but the Packers actually controlled most of that Week 2 matchup against the Falcons. But if you play that game in December as opposed to September,
yes,
those are 2 very different teams by the end of the season. One trending up, one trending down.
Absolutely.
And it's just all about where you catch guys. But the only thing you can hope for, and again, we'll see what Matt LaFleur has to say about it, and we'll see how things line up for Green Bay once we get into this thing and how things look after Brazil. But for Green Bay having a very unique and an unprecedented start to the season by traveling to South America, after that, I felt like it lined up pretty well for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, all that's left is to play the games, right, Wes?
And we also got to do OTAs and minicamp.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and shareholders meeting.
Yeah.
And
the players actually have to get ready to play the
yes.
season now, even though you and I are ready to go. Right?
I
sort of.
Man,
maybe.
I don't want to do the whole Click or whatever that Adam Sandler movie thing was, but it's sometimes with this stuff, Mike, we had an announcement this week for scheduling,
and then they were trickling out these these big matchups one by one, like Tom Brady's Fox broadcast debut is going to be this game, and then they even released a Week 2 game, I think, or something.
Yeah, I think half of Kansas City's schedule was out by the time.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is all about Kansas City. Kansas City is starting the season with the Ravens and the Bengals back to back.
Yeah,
I mean, my goodness, and those are obviously 2 of their biggest playoff rivals at this point, and then they're not even into their division rivalries.
I think you want to wrap up, but can I ask you this quick? Do you think we've ever had a team in the National Football League with 2 bigger stars than Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce? I mean, Patrick Mahomes has become the face of this league.
Yes, 100%.
And he's a future Hall of Famer. I think he's 28 years old. He's already in the Hall of Fame. Just put him in there. It's done. Yeah. First ballot. And then Travis Kelce, 1, he's a Hall of Fame tight end, but 2, obviously the relationship with Taylor Swift. That's about as Hollywood as a team has gotten. I would say it's reminiscent, but in the instance I'm going to bring up, it was 3 players: Aikman, Emmitt Smith, and Michael Irvin,
with that Cowboys dynasty that won 3 Super Bowls in 4 years back in the early 90s. It's reminiscent of that in terms of multiple guys on the same team kind of being the face of the league.
Yeah.
In Kansas City's case, it really is those 2 guys. In the Cowboys' case, 30 years ago, it was 3 guys. And a head coach who, not taking anything away from Andy Reid, but a head coach that was a little bit more bombastic.
He was Miami.
Personality-wise, was out there, right? In Jimmy Johnson. So
yeah, no, it's interesting and it's fun. And again, I remember last year when they booked the Chiefs and Packers for a primetime game. I mean, this is what happens when you have a young ascending quarterback. You're going to see more of these things happen. I said it to you in Unscripted. I expected us to have a 5 primetime games. That's how it worked out.
Yep.
Really looking forward to covering a game in Brazil with you at 9:15 local. And I'm sure you and I won't hate each other when by the time we're flying back into Green Bay that following day. We'll be totally cool with each other. We won't be tired and agitated or anything at all.
Not
we
after,
won't even play in the game.
Not after sitting around in a hotel in Sao Paulo for 2 days just waiting to cover a football game.
Maybe I'll get some sun.
Yeah, maybe. All right. With that, we're going to call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team, all sorts of coverage of the schedule, what's out there. We got stories, we got videos. It's all there for you on Packers.com. For Wes, I'm Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.